Before Canada became known as a symbol of stability, prosperity, and multicultural harmony, its history was shaped by migration, conflict, compromise, and transformation. From ancient Indigenous civilizations to colonial rivalries, from a British dominion to an independent voice on the global stage, Canada's journey reflects some of the most defining forces of human history. But history does not end in the past. In today's world of shifting power balances, climate change, and geopolitical uncertainty, Canada occupies a position far more strategic than it might appear at first glance. Its geography, resources, and proximity to the world's most powerful nation have placed it at the center of quiet but meaningful global tensions. To understand modern Canada, we must look not only at where it came from, but at where it stands today. Canada, a nation. Stretching from the depths of history to the present day, Canada's story reaches far beyond the founding of a modern state. It is a long and layered history shaped by humanity's earliest migrations, clashes between colonial empires, and ultimately the emergence of a contemporary country built on peace, prosperity, and multiculturalism. Known today as a calm, stable, and influential nation, Canada has earned this identity through centuries of transformation. Ancient lands and the First Peoples. Human presence on the lands that form present-day Canada dates back roughly 15,000 to 20,000 years, toward the end of the last ice age. At that time, a natural land bridge, known as the Bering Land Bridge, connected Asia and North America, allowing early human groups to migrate across continents. Over time, these peoples spread throughout the vast Canadian landscape, adapting to its diverse climates and environments. The ancestors of today's First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples emerged from these early migrations. Inuit communities developed sophisticated ways of life in the harsh Arctic regions, relying on hunting and fishing, while many First Nation societies settled around forests, rivers, and lakes, practicing agriculture, trade, and seasonal hunting. These societies created complex social structures, strong oral traditions, and deeply rooted spiritual beliefs. The cultural and moral foundations of Canada are inseparable from the civilizations built by these Indigenous peoples. Encounter with Europe and the beginning of a new era. One of the most decisive turning points in Canada's history came with the arrival of Europeans. Although Viking explorers are believed to have briefly reached the eastern coasts centuries earlier, it was the expeditions of the 15th and 16th centuries that permanently altered the region's destiny. Rich fishing grounds and the lucrative fur trade drew European powers into what would become Canada. France established the first lasting European settlement in 1608 with the founding of Quebec. The region became known as New France. Through alliances and trade with Indigenous peoples, the French expanded the fur trade and created a distinct cultural sphere in North America. However, the relatively small French population and the growing ambitions of Britain set the stage for an inevitable struggle for control. British rule and the birth of a dual identity. Throughout the 18th century, Canada became a key battleground in the global rivalry between Britain and France. The decisive moment came in 1759 with the Battle of the Plains of Abraham. Britain's victory fundamentally reshaped Canada's future. With the Treaty of Paris in 1763, France ceded Canada to Britain. Despite this transfer of power, the French-speaking population remained. British authorities allowed the preservation of French language, religion, and legal traditions, creating a rare dual cultural system within an empire. This compromise laid the groundwork for Canada's modern bilingual and bicultural identity. From colony to nation. The 19th century marked a gradual but determined transition from colony to self-governing nation. Still part of the British Empire, Canada gained increasing importance, particularly after the American War of Independence. Britain invested in political reforms and infrastructure to secure its northern territories. This evolution culminated on July 1, 1867, with the creation of the Canadian Confederation. Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick united to form a new political entity. While Canada remained tied to the British Crown, it achieved broad autonomy in domestic affairs. Expansion westward, the construction of transcontinental railways, and economic growth transformed Canada into a vast and cohesive country. World Wars and the shaping of an international identity. The 20th century propelled Canada onto the world stage. During the First World War, Canada fought alongside Britain, and the sacrifices made by its soldiers fostered a strong sense of national identity. The war demonstrated that Canada was no longer merely a colonial extension, but a nation capable of acting on the global stage. The Second World War further solidified this status. Canada contributed not only troops, but also massive industrial production, becoming a crucial supporter of the Allied effort. In the post-war period, Canada emerged economically stronger and politically more independent, increasingly recognized as a sovereign power. A peace-oriented power and a multicultural society. After the devastation of global conflict, Canada embraced a foreign policy centered on diplomacy, cooperation, and peacekeeping. It became a founding member of the United Nations, joined NATO, and gained international respect through its leadership in peacekeeping missions. Rather than projecting power through force, Canada cultivated an image built on mediation and dialogue. Domestically, the country was transformed by waves of immigration. People from Europe, Asia, Africa, and other regions reshaped Canadian society, giving rise to one of the world's most multicultural nations. Diversity became not a challenge to be managed, but a defining strength of Canadian identity. Canada today and its place in history. Today, Canada stands out for its high quality of life, strong democratic institutions, commitment to human rights, and multicultural social fabric. The country continues to confront and acknowledge injustices faced by Indigenous peoples, seeking reconciliation rather than denial of its past. Canada's history is more than the story of a single nation. It reflects humanity's broader journey of migration, conflict, compromise, and coexistence. In this sense, Canada occupies a unique place both in world history and in the contemporary global order. Canada's strategic role in the modern world and the quiet tensions with the United States. As Canada enters the 21st century, its importance is no longer defined only by its values, living standards, or multicultural identity. Geography, natural resources, and global power shifts have placed Canada in a position of growing strategic significance, one that inevitably shapes its complex relationship with its closest neighbor and strongest ally, the United States. Geography as power. Canada's strategic position. Canada's strategic importance begins with its geography. Stretching from the Atlantic to the Pacific and deep into the Arctic, Canada controls one of the largest territorial expanses in the world. This vastness is not only symbolic, it is geopolitical leverage. In recent decades, climate change has accelerated the melting of Arctic ice, bringing global attention to the Northwest Passage, a potential new maritime route connecting Europe and Asia. Canada considers this route part of its internal waters, while other powers, including the United States, view it as an international strait. This disagreement is not merely legal. It reflects competing visions of sovereignty, trade, and military access in the Arctic. As the Arctic becomes more accessible, Canada finds itself at the center of a new strategic frontier involving global powers such as Russia and China. Arctic surveillance, sovereignty patrols, and infrastructure investments have therefore become core elements of Canada's long-term security planning. Natural resources and economic leverage. Canada possesses vast reserves of freshwater, oil, natural gas, critical minerals, timber, and agricultural land. In an era defined by resource competition and supply chain security, these assets elevate Canada's global relevance. The United States depends heavily on Canadian energy exports, particularly oil, natural gas, and hydroelectric power. Canada is consistently the largest trading partner of the U.S., with billions of dollars worth of goods crossing the border daily. This deep economic integration makes the relationship mutually beneficial, but also fragile. Disputes over pipelines, environmental regulations, lumber, dairy products, and critical minerals regularly expose underlying tensions. Canada seeks to balance economic cooperation with environmental commitments and national autonomy, while the United States prioritizes energy security and domestic industry. Defense, NORAD, and shared security. Militarily, Canada and the United States are bound together through NORAD, the Joint North American Aerospace Defense Command. This partnership reflects a shared understanding. The defense of North America is indivisible. Yet even within this alliance, pressure points exist. The United States has increasingly urged Canada to expand its military spending, modernize Arctic defenses, and take on greater responsibility in continental security. Canada, meanwhile, has historically emphasized diplomacy, multilateralism, and peacekeeping over military projection. This difference in strategic culture creates subtle friction. While Canada benefits from U.S. military power, it is also cautious about being drawn too deeply into American global conflicts or security doctrines that could limit its independent foreign policy. Political alignment and ideological friction. Despite shared democratic values, Canada and the United States do not always align politically. Canada generally embraces multilateral institutions, international law, climate agreements, and regulated capitalism. U.S. policy, particularly during periods of political polarization, can diverge sharply from these principles. Recent years have highlighted disagreements over climate policy and environmental standards, trade tariffs and protectionism, border security and migration, the role of international organizations. Canada often finds itself in the position of cooperating with U.S. power while simultaneously attempting to soften, moderate, or distance itself from certain American policies on the global stage. A relationship defined by proximity, not simplicity. The tension between Canada and the United States is rarely loud or dramatic. It does not resemble open rivalry, but rather a constant negotiation between dependence and independence. Canada relies on the United States economically and militarily, yet remains deeply invested in preserving its sovereignty, identity, and distinct global voice. This dynamic places Canada in a unique position, a country powerful enough to matter, but close enough to a superpower that every strategic choice must be carefully calibrated. Canada's role in a changing world order. As global power becomes more fragmented and competition intensifies in regions like the Arctic, Canada's strategic value will only increase. Its challenge is not survival, but balance, between cooperation and autonomy, alliance and independence, geography and identity. In this sense, modern Canada is no longer just a peaceful middle power. It is a quiet but essential actor in global stability, standing at the intersection of resources, geography, and great power politics, aware that its greatest strength may lie in navigating tension without turning it into conflict. Canada's story is often told as one of peace, compromise, and cooperation, and that story is largely true. Yet beneath this calm exterior lies a country navigating some of the most complex strategic realities of the modern world. Bordered by the United States, connected through trade, defense, and shared security, Canada walks a careful line between partnership and independence. In the Arctic, in global diplomacy, and in the competition for resources, its decisions quietly shape the future of North America. Canada is not a loud power, nor an aggressive one. Its influence is subtle, built on balance rather than dominance, and perhaps that is its greatest strength. As the world enters an era defined by uncertainty, Canada stands as a reminder that power does not always announce itself. Sometimes it simply endures.